2 weeks. That's how long it had been since Shen left me at the brothel door. The first week, I waited every night. The second week, I counted the days. By the 14th day, the silence felt heavier than the heat. I went to the head mistress, my hands twisting the hem of my simple light blue mid-sleeve cotton dress, the only dress I had left that wasn't ruined. "Have you heard from Mr. Shen?" I asked quietly. She didn't even look up from her ledger. No messages. If he wanted you, he'd come. Her words stung more than I expected. That night, I lay on my small bed, staring at the ceiling. The room felt too quiet without him, too still. I thought about the island, the heat, the way he held me as if I were something fragile. I thought about the silence he left behind. The next afternoon, the sun was merciless, a white, burning disk hanging over Saigon. The air felt thick enough to drink, clinging to my skin as I walked back from the small market with a woven basket of rice and vegetables. My light blue mid-sleeve cotton dress stuck to my back, the fabric worn thin from years of washing. Sweat gathered at my hairline, and I wiped it away with the back of my hand, adjusting the simple ribbon that kept my long dark hair tied back. The street was busy, vendors shouting, bicycles rattling past, the smell of fish and dust mixing in the heat. I kept my head down, moving quickly, wanting only to return to my room and the small comfort of shade. But as I turned the corner toward the brothel, my steps faltered. A black luxury car was parked across the street, polished, gleaming, completely out of place among the cracked walls and faded signs. My heart tightened. I knew that car. I stood frozen for a moment, the basket growing heavy in my hands. The world around me blurred, the noise, the heat, the people, all fading into a distant hum. Because I knew who sat inside. I felt him before I saw him. Shen. The heat that afternoon was unbearable, the kind that pressed against the skin and made every breath feel heavy. I walked back from the small market with a woven basket of rice and vegetables, my light blue mid-sleeve cotton dress sticking to my back. When I reached the brothel steps, I paused. I needed to drop the basket off before going back outside. The head mistress hated clutter. I slipped inside quickly, placed the basket on the small table in the hallway, and stepped back out into the blinding sunlight. And there it was, the black luxury car. Parked across the street, polished, silent, waiting, as if it had been there for hours. I didn't see Shen at first, but I felt him, that invisible pull, the one that always found me. I walked toward the car slowly, my heart pounding. When I reached the window, he was there, thinner, paler, shadows under his eyes, watching me with a look I couldn't name. He didn't speak, he didn't gesture, but I understood. I opened the door and got in. The door closed behind me with a soft click. The air inside the car was cooler, but the tension was thick. Shen didn't look at me at first. He stared ahead, jaw tight, breathing slow, as if he were holding something back. Then his hand moved, slowly, carefully. His fingers brushed mine, then took my hand fully, turning it over in his palm. He traced the lines of my fingers, the curve of my wrist, not possessive, not demanding, just needing. I looked out the window, unable to meet his eyes. The city blurred past us as the car pulled away from the brothel. I didn't know where he was taking me, but I knew I would follow him anywhere. The car left the city behind, trading noise for quiet roads and thick green trees. The heat followed us, heavy and unmoving. We arrived at one of Shen's deserted gardens, overgrown, wild, forgotten. He stepped out first, and I followed him down a stone path toward a small lake hidden beneath tall trees. The water shimmered in the heat, still and inviting. Shen removed his open white shirt and stepped into the lake, the water rising to his waist. "Come," he said softly. I stepped into the water wearing only my simple white petticoat, modest, clinging slightly from the humidity. The water was cool against my skin. The world was quiet. We stood there facing each other, the heat of Saigon finally breaking around us. The water was cool around my legs, a relief against the suffocating Saigon heat. Shen stood in front of me, waist deep, the sunlight catching the droplets on his skin. His expression was different, not the controlled, unreadable mask he wore in the city. Here, in the quiet of the garden, he looked almost human, almost breakable. "May," he said softly, as if my name hurt to speak. I lifted my eyes to him. The world felt impossibly still. "I tried to stay away," he said, voice low, strained. "I thought I could. I thought it was the right thing." He took a step closer, the water rippling between us. "But every day I didn't see you." He swallowed hard. It felt like something was missing. My breath caught. The heat, the water, the silence. Everything pressed in around us. He reached up slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His hand cupped the side of my face, thumb brushing my cheek with a tenderness that made my chest ache. And then he kissed me. Soft, slow. A kiss that felt like a confession he didn't know how to speak. The world disappeared. The heat, the garden, the lake, until it was only him and the quiet truth between us. We spent the whole day together after that, walking through the garden, sitting by the water, talking in fragments, in silences, in glances that said more than words ever could. By the time Shen brought me back, the sun was low and the heat had settled into a heavy haze. I stepped inside the brothel quietly, still feeling the warmth of his hand in mine, the echo of his kiss. The head mistress was waiting. "May," she said, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "We need to talk." I followed her into her office, my heart still somewhere in that garden. "The way you're going with Mr. Shen," she said, voice firm but not unkind, "will get you nowhere." I lowered my eyes. "Men like him don't choose girls like you," she continued. "You need to get your head out of the clouds. He doesn't need you." Her words stung, but I didn't argue. "I know," I whispered. "I know what we are." She sighed, softer this time. "Then why do you keep hoping?" I looked at the floor, fingers twisting the hem of my dress. "Because," I said quietly, "even if the distance between us never closes, I can't stop hoping." Shen returned the next night. The brothel was quiet when he arrived, too quiet. The girls whispered behind their hands as he walked past them, his expression unreadable. The head mistress led him to the finished room, the one reserved for important clients. He stood in the center of it, hands behind his back, waiting. "Bring May," he said. But before she could leave, he added, "And tell her to wear the Chinese dress I sent. Hair parted into 2 plaits." The head mistress nodded, though her eyes flickered with something like worry. When I entered, Shen was seated at the low table, pouring tea. My hair was parted into 2 neat plaits, the Chinese dress fitting awkwardly against my simple frame. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "May, I will be getting engaged in 2 days." The teacup trembled in my hands. "Do you want to come?" he asked. I stared at him, stunned. "Do you not think that's cruel?" I whispered. "To invite me to your engagement?" He didn't flinch. "No, you need to see the reality of things." His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. "Even if I care for you," he said quietly, "I cannot keep you." 2 days later, just before dusk, the brothel girls whispered that a car was waiting outside. A driver stood beside it, tall, formal, dressed in a crisp white shirt and black trousers. "For Miss May," he said. My heart tightened. Shen had sent for me. I wore the simple pastel Chinese dress he had chosen. My hair was loose for once, long, wavy, falling softly down my back, held away from my face with a single delicate ribbon. It felt strange, too soft, too feminine, too much like a woman trying to belong somewhere she didn't. The dress felt too fine for me, too delicate, like something borrowed from a world I didn't belong to. When I stepped into the car, the driver didn't speak. He only nodded and closed the door gently behind me. The city lights blurred past as we drove. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew who was waiting. The car moved slowly through the streets, the hum of the engine soft beneath me. I kept my hands folded in my lap, trying to calm the trembling in my fingers. I watched Saigon blur past the window, the lanterns, the street vendors closing their stalls, the warm dusk settling over the city like a heavy blanket. Everything looked familiar, yet I felt like I was being carried into a world I had no right to enter. The pastel Chinese dress Shen chose for me rested lightly against my skin. My hair, loose, long, wavy, brushed against my shoulders every time the car turned. I wasn't used to wearing it down. It made me feel exposed and strangely beautiful. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew who was waiting. When the car finally stopped, the driver opened the door with a small bow. Lanterns glowed above a grand colonial hall. Music drifted out, soft, elegant, expensive. I stepped out, and the night air wrapped around me like warm silk. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. Silk gowns shimmered under the lanterns. Gold jewelry sparkled. Women with perfect hair and powdered faces turned to look at me, not with curiosity, but with something sharper. I felt their eyes travel over my simple dress, my bare face, my loose hair. I didn't belong here. I knew it. They knew it. A servant guided me through the hall, weaving between tables draped in red silk. "Here, miss," he said softly. He seated me near the front, too close, too visible, a place chosen with intention, a place where Shen could see me, and he did. He stood beside his fiancée, dressed in formal cream attire, but his gaze kept drifting toward me. Not once, not twice, again and again. His fiancée noticed. Her smile tightened, her posture stiffened. Her eyes followed his eyes and found me. The engagement announcement ended with polite applause, the kind that sounded rehearsed. Shen and his fiancée bowed together, smiling for the room, but I could see the stiffness in his shoulders even from where I sat. Then the music changed, softer, lighter, and the hall loosened. Guests rose from their seats, drifting into small groups, laughing, drinking, congratulating the couple. I stayed where I was. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who I could speak to. I felt like a misplaced ornament someone had forgotten to hide. I tried not to look at Shen, but I felt him watching me. Every time I lifted my eyes, his gaze was already there, steady, unreadable, burning through the distance between us. I pretended not to notice, but the room felt too bright, too sharp, too full of people who didn't want me there. That was when she approached. Shen's fiancée. She moved through the crowd like silk gliding over polished floors, tall, graceful, wrapped in shimmering gold. Her hair was pinned high with pearls, her face flawless, her posture perfect. She stopped in front of me with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You stand out," she said softly. "All the men are looking at you." Her tone was sweet, her meaning was not. I lowered my gaze. "I didn't come here to be seen." "No," she replied, still smiling. "You didn't." Her voice was honey. Her words were knives, and I felt every one of them. I held my breath for a moment, trying to steady the sting in my chest. The hall felt suddenly too warm, too crowded, too loud. I could feel eyes on me, Not kind ones, not curious ones, just eyes that knew I didn't belong. I bowed my head slightly, more out of instinct than respect, and stepped away from her. I didn't rush. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me flee, but each step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking through water. I moved toward the dimmer edge of the hall, where the lantern light softened and the chatter faded into a distant hum. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed the fabric of my light green aquamarine dress. It was beautiful, too beautiful for me. Everything here was. I felt small, out of place, like a mistake someone had forgotten to correct. I kept my eyes down, trying to swallow the ache in my throat. That was when I heard a voice, gentle, careful, as if he didn't want to startle me. "Excuse me, miss?" I turned. A young British man stood a few steps away, watching me with a kind of quiet understanding I hadn't expected from anyone in this room. He looked at me, really looked, at my simple dress, my loose hair, my bare face, the way I was trying to disappear into the shadows. "You seem a bit out of place," he said softly. "Would you like to step outside for some air?" His tone wasn't mocking, it wasn't pitying, it was human. And for the first time that night, I felt like I could breathe. I nodded before I even realized I was moving. He stepped aside to let me pass, holding the door open without touching me, without assuming anything. The gesture was small, but it felt like the first kindness I'd been offered all night. The warm Saigon air met me like a sigh. Lanterns swayed gently along the veranda, their soft glow brushing the tiled floor in gold. Out here, the world felt quieter, softer, almost safe. I leaned lightly against the railing, trying to steady the trembling in my hands. He stood a respectful distance beside me, not crowding, not staring, just present. "You don't have to say anything," he said quietly. "I just thought you might need a moment." I tried to answer, but the words tangled in my throat. He glanced at my dress, the light green aquamarine silk, too fine for someone like me, and I saw the understanding settle in his eyes. Not judgment, recognition. He knew what kind of girl wore a dress like this, who she belonged to, what it meant. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "You shouldn't have to stand in a room that makes you feel so small." Something inside me cracked. My breath hitched, my vision blurred, and before I could stop myself, the tears came. Sudden, hot, unstoppable. I pressed a hand to my mouth, ashamed, but it was useless. Everything I had held in, the humiliation, the loneliness, the ache of pretending I didn't care, spilled out of me all at once. He didn't recoil. He didn't look uncomfortable. He stepped closer slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. When I didn't, he wrapped his arms around me, gently, carefully, the way someone holds something fragile. I cried into his shoulder, shaking, unable to stop. He didn't ask questions. He didn't try to fix anything. He just held me, a stranger, but the kindest person I had met that night. When the sobs finally softened, I pulled back, wiping my face with trembling fingers. He didn't look at me with pity, only quiet concern. "You deserve better than this," he said softly. "Better than whatever brought you here." His voice was steady, sincere. "Would you like to leave?" I felt small, fragile, like a child, but I nodded. "Where do you live?" he asked gently. I gave him the address. The moment I said it, I saw the truth settle in his eyes. The whole picture, the life I came from, the weight I carried. He didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He only nodded. "We'll go together." And as he guided me toward the steps, I felt it, a presence behind us. I turned just enough to see him, Shen, standing in the shadows of the doorway, a cigarette between his fingers, smoke curling around him like a ghost. His eyes were on me. He saw everything. The car ride back felt strangely quiet. The British man didn't try to speak again. He simply sat beside me, hands folded, gaze turned toward the passing lanterns outside the window. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't expect anything. When the car stopped in front of the brothel, he stepped out first and opened the door for me. "Take care," he said softly. I wanted to thank him. I wanted to ask his name, but the words caught in my throat. He gave me a small, understanding nod, the kind that said he didn't need anything more, and then he turned and stepped into the car. I stood there for a moment, watching the car drove away and vanished, and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Kindness, gentleness, a reminder of a world I didn't belong to. Inside my room, I changed into my bedclothes and lay down on the thin mattress. The sheets felt cool against my skin, but my thoughts were warm and restless. I kept seeing his face, the British man, the way he looked at me without judgment, the way he held me when I broke, the way he said, "You deserve better than this." My heart ached. I didn't want to believe him. How could I? Look at where I lived. Look at what I was. But the softness in his voice lingered, echoing in the quiet room. I thought about the engagement, the humiliation, the way I drifted through the hall like something ornamental, waiting for Shen to acknowledge me. He never did. Why had he wanted me there? To prove something? To remind me of my place? I felt exposed, small, tired of being pulled into a life that wasn't mine. My eyes grew heavy, and exhaustion finally pulled me under. I must have drifted off without meaning to. The room was dim, the lantern burning low, when a soft knock pulled me back to consciousness. "May," the head mistress whispered through the door, her voice tight. She pushed it open just a little, only enough for her face to appear in the crack. "Master Shen is here." My stomach tightened instantly. "I don't want to see him," I murmured, still half asleep, my voice small. "I'm not feeling well, I didn't even finish. The door suddenly pushed wider. Shen stepped inside without waiting for permission. The head mistress immediately stepped back into the hallway, out of the room, giving us privacy, but staying close enough to hear if things escalated. The door remained half open, her shadow visible in the corridor. Shen stood in the doorway, still in his cream engagement attire, his hair slightly undone, his expression dark and unreadable. He looked angry, but beneath the anger there was something else, a tightness, a fear, as if he had rushed here before he could think. "I saw you leave with that man," he said, voice low and strained. He didn't wait. "Did you sleep with him?" The question hit me like a slap. I pushed myself upright slowly, breath catching. "May," he pressed, stepping closer, jaw tight. "I'm talking to you. Did you sleep with him?" Tears stung my eyes again. I hated that he could still make me cry. "No," I whispered. The word trembled out of me. I felt overwhelmed by the night, by him, by everything I had tried to hold inside. My chest tightened, my breath uneven. Shen's expression shifted just slightly. He didn't know how to comfort me. He never had. But he didn't like seeing me cry. It unsettled him. "Why are you crying?" he asked, frustration and worry tangled together. "I hate you," I said quietly, the words shaking. "I hate this life. I hate this place. I don't want to see you anymore." The words came out raw, unfiltered, sharper than I intended, but truer than anything I'd said in a long time. I saw the way they hit him, like a blade. His breath faltered, his shoulders stiffened, and then he moved. He stepped forward and pulled me into his arms, not gently, not harshly, but with a desperate, almost panicked hold. His hands trembled slightly against my back. It wasn't affection. It wasn't tenderness. It was fear. Fear that I might leave him. Fear that he had pushed too far. Fear that the British man had shown me a world he couldn't control. "I shouldn't have invited you to the engagement," he said, voice rough, breath uneven against my hair. "I'm sorry, May. I thought it was the right thing. I was wrong." His grip tightened, as if he was afraid I would slip away if he loosened even a little. I'm sorry," he whispered again, the words cracking at the edges. Outside the door, the head mistress lowered her gaze. She had seen enough to understand the storm inside the room. Shen stayed the night. The bed was too small for 2 people, but he didn't leave. He lay stiffly beside me, his back against the wall, his breathing uneven. He didn't touch me. He didn't speak. He stayed because he was afraid that if he walked out, I would be gone when he returned. I barely slept. Every time I opened my eyes, I saw the outline of him, tense, restless, as if he didn't know how to be in the same room with his own feelings. When morning came, he stood quietly, smoothing his wrinkled cream shirt. For a moment, he just looked at me, not with anger, not with control, but with something raw and unsettled. Then he left. The door closed softly behind him. I got dressed slowly, my hands trembling more than I wanted to admit. When I stepped out into the hallway, the head mistress was waiting. "May," she said, "come to my office." I followed her down the narrow corridor, the wooden floor creaking under our steps. She closed the office door behind us and gestured for me to sit. She studied me for a long moment before speaking. "I heard him leave," she said quietly, "and I heard enough last night to know Mr. Shen is conflicted." My heart tightened. She folded her hands on the desk. "Men who fall in love with girls from this place, they take them away. They give them a clean life, a new start." She paused. "But Mr. Shen is not that kind of man. He comes from a family of men who use brothels for comfort, not for a future." Her words were sharp, but not cruel. They were meant to protect me. I lowered my eyes. I knew she was right. I had always known. But Shen had told me he loved me. He had said it with a voice that shook. He had held me like he was afraid of losing me. I couldn't tell her that. I didn't want to share that part of him, or of myself. "I understand," I said softly. "I'm not expecting anything from him." She watched me carefully, as if trying to see whether I believed my own words. Then she nodded. But my heart ached, because I did want more, even if I knew I shouldn't. A week passed. Shen didn't come. Not once. Every time the brothel door opened downstairs, my heart jumped, and then fell again. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I didn't want him to come, but the truth sat heavy in my chest. Then, one afternoon, a messenger arrived. A folded note, my name written in Shen's handwriting. Inside, "Come to this address. Wear the blue dress, hair in 2 plaits." My breath caught. He was calling for me again. I folded the note carefully, pressing it against my chest for a moment before I could breathe again. A week of silence had carved something hollow inside me, and now this single piece of paper filled it with a rush of fear and relief I didn't know how to separate. I changed into the blue dress slowly, smoothing the fabric with trembling hands. The color felt too bright for how uncertain I felt inside. I parted my hair and braided it into 2 neat plaits, the way he asked. It made me look younger, almost like the girl I had been before the brothel, before him, before everything. The address wasn't far. Shen had been careful about that. He knew I had grown up behind those walls. He knew taking me too far away would feel like tearing me from the only world I understood, so he chose a place within walking distance. The heat outside was intense, the kind that clung to your skin and made the air feel thick. Sweat gathered at the back of my neck as I walked, the sun beating down on the yellow colonial buildings around me. The streets were familiar, yet each step felt like I was walking towards something I wasn't ready for. But I kept going. My heart beat faster the closer I got, not from the heat, from him. When I reached the building, I hesitated. It was small, quiet, tucked away from the noise of the city, as if hidden on purpose. I pushed the door open. Shen was inside. He stood in the center of the room, hands in his pockets, wearing a light linen suit. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just watched me, as if he had been waiting for this moment, unsure of how I would react. The room was bare, a bed, a table, a lantern, not much else, but it was close to the brothel, close enough that I could walk back if I needed to, close enough that I wouldn't feel lost. He had chosen it that way, for me, for the girl who had never lived anywhere else. I stepped inside, the heat still clinging to my skin, my heart beating too fast, and something inside me shifted, quietly, painfully, undeniably. This wasn't freedom, this wasn't a future, but it was a beginning he wanted me to have, even if it was imperfect, even if it was still tied to him. Shen didn't move when I stepped inside. He just watched me, his eyes tracing the blue dress, the braids, the way the heat had flushed my cheeks. A week of silence hung between us like a held breath. Then he crossed the room in 2 quick steps. Before I could speak, before I could even steady myself, he kissed me. Roughly at first, as if the days without me had carved something raw inside him. His hands came up to my face, holding me too tightly, his breath uneven against my lips. I froze, not out of fear, out of shock, out of the suddenness of it, out of the ache I had been trying to bury all week. Then something in him softened, the pressure eased, his hands gentled, the kiss shifted, still full of longing, but no longer desperate, tender, almost apologetic. He looked around the room once more, then back at me. "It's not perfect," he said quietly, "but it's a start. For you." I nodded, my fingers tightening around the fabric of my dress. "Thank you," I whispered. He exhaled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. For a moment, neither of us moved. The room felt too small for everything we weren't saying. I appreciated what he had done, the effort, the thought, the closeness to the brothel so I wouldn't feel lost. But I also knew the truth. This was not freedom. This was not a life of my own. It was a place he chose, a place he controlled, a place that kept me near him, a beginning, but not the kind that opened into a future. Still, I stepped further inside, because it was the only beginning I had. After Shen stepped back from me, the room felt strangely quiet. I took a slow breath and let my eyes wander. The apartment was small, smaller than I expected, but it felt different from the brothel. The air was still, untouched. The walls were bare, waiting for something to belong to them. A single lantern glowed on the table, casting warm light across the wooden floor. There was a balcony door on the far side of the room, slightly open, letting in a faint breeze. I stepped toward it, touching the frame gently. Outside, the street below was calm, the evening settling over the city like a soft blanket. I had never had a balcony before, never had a space that opened to the world instead of closing me in. Behind me, Shen spoke quietly. "I chose this place because it's close," he said. "You grew up in the brothel. I didn't want to take you too far from what you know." I turned to him. "You spoke to the head mistress," I said softly. He nodded. "She told me you don't have much, only the clothes I bought you." His voice tightened slightly. "I wanted you to have something, a place that's yours." I looked around again. The bed, the table, the lantern, the balcony. It wasn't much, but it was more than I had ever been given. "It's not perfect," he said, "but it's a start. A start." I nodded. "Thank you," I whispered. He stepped closer, his expression softening in a way I rarely saw. There was no anger in him now, no jealousy, just a quiet longing, the kind that had been building for a week. That night, I moved into the apartment. I carried only a small bundle of clothes, the ones he had bought for me, and placed them neatly in the corner. Shen stayed with me, helping me settle in, lighting the lantern, opening the balcony door to let in the night air. When the room grew quiet and the lantern dimmed, he lay beside me on the small bed. We stayed under the covers, close enough to feel each other's breath. His hand found mine beneath the blanket, warm and steady. He kissed me softly. Nothing rushed, nothing desperate, just the kind of kiss that said he had missed me more than he could admit. The rest of the night passed in quiet closeness, our bodies hidden beneath the sheets, the lantern flickering low. It was tender. It was gentle. It was the first night of my new life, a life that was mine, and yet still tied to him. 3 months passed. 3 months of the same quiet walls, the same still air, the same small balcony overlooking the street below. 3 months of waiting. Every evening, I sat alone in the apartment, listening for footsteps on the stairs. And every night, Shen came. He always arrived late, after his world had finished with him. He would close the door behind him, loosen his collar, and look at me as if he had been starving for days. And then he would come to me. Every night, the same rhythm. Intense at first, then soft, then quiet. Always under the covers, always in the dim lantern light, always with the same unspoken longing. It was tender, it was familiar, it was the only time I felt him truly present. But when morning came, he left, and I stayed. I hardly left the apartment. There was nowhere for me to go, nothing for me to do. My life had become a waiting room, a place where time moved only when he was near. One afternoon, the head mistress sent a message through a neighborhood boy. A letter had arrived for me at the brothel. I hadn't expected anything. No one wrote to me. No one even knew where I lived now, except Shen. When I opened the envelope, my breath caught. It was from the British man. He addressed me as May. The head mistress must have told him my name. His handwriting was neat, careful, almost gentle. He wrote that his time in Saigon was coming to an end, that he had gone to the brothel to see me, only to learn I had moved out, that he hoped I was well, and that he would like to see me again, but only if I wished it. I read the letter twice, then a third time. Something inside me shifted. My life with Shen. It wasn't growing. It wasn't changing. It wasn't becoming anything more than nights under the covers and days spent alone. I was in an apartment, but I wasn't living. I folded the letter carefully. I wanted to thank him. I wanted to see him. And maybe, just for a moment, I wanted to remember what it felt like to be seen by someone who wasn't trying to keep me hidden. I decided I would go.